There are places in this world where the past refuses to stay, buried where the whispers of ancient curses cling to forgotten tombs, sacred relics, and lost treasures. Stories of these curses aren't just campfire tales, they're etched into history, written in the blood of those who dared to disturb what should have been left alone. From the moment these doomed explorers brushed the dust off a long-sealed door or pried open a coffin untouched for centuries, their fates were sealed. Some called it coincidence, others called it punishment, but the one thing they all had in common, none of them walked away unscathed. Think about the last time you stumbled upon something old, maybe a family heirloom tucked in an attic or a strange coin half buried in dirt. Now imagine uncovering something far more sinister, something never meant to be found. That's the terrifying reality behind the most infamous ancient curses ever documented. These aren't just warnings scrawled on crumbling walls, they're real-life tragedies where curiosity turned deadly. The allure of discovery is powerful, but what happens when the past fights back? What if the treasure you seek comes with a price no one can escape? This isn't just about superstition. It's about the chilling, well-documented moments when history exacted its revenge, when archaeologists, grave robbers, and adventurers met ends so bizarre, so eerily timed that even skeptics paused. Some were struck down by sudden illness, others vanished without a trace. A few met fate so gruesome they seemed ripped straight from myth. In this journey, we'll uncover the truth behind these curses, peeling back layers of time to reveal the real stories behind the legends. These aren't just ghost stories, they're cautionary tales written in blood and stone. And by the end, you might just think twice before reaching for that next ancient artifact. The moment Howard Carter's chisel broke through the sealed doorway of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, the world held its breath. For the first time in over 3,000 years, sunlight spilled across golden treasures, eerie statues, and the untouched sarcophagus of the boy king. But beneath the awe lay something darker, an inscription carved into the tomb's walls warning of death coming on swift wings to those who disturb the pharaoh's rest. At first, it seemed like just another ancient superstition. Then the deaths began. Lord Carnarvon, the wealthy financier of the expedition, was the first to fall. Just weeks after entering the tomb, he died in Cairo from a seemingly minor mosquito bite that turned septic. Newspapers quickly seized on the tragedy, dubbing it the pharaoh's curse, especially when strange details emerged, like reports that Carnarvon's beloved dog howled and dropped dead at the exact moment of his death back in England. But he wasn't the only one. Over the next decade, at least a dozen others connected to the tomb succumbed to bizarre misfortunes. One man, Carter's personal secretary, died under mysterious circumstances, his death certificate cryptically listing the cause as unknown. Another, a radiologist who helped examine Tutankhamun's mummy, wasted away from an inexplicable illness. Even skeptics couldn't ignore the eerie pattern. Was it really a curse or something far more tangible? Scientists later proposed rational explanations: toxic mold spores preserved in the tomb's stale air, or strains of ancient bacteria reactivated after millennia in darkness. Some pointed to poisonous materials like mercury or arsenic used in burial rituals. But then why did the curse seem to target only some while sparing others, like Carter himself, who lived another 16 years? The truth might lie somewhere between science and legend. Ancient Egyptians didn't just rely on magic. They engineered their tombs with traps, psychological warnings, and even biological deterrents to protect their dead. Whether supernatural or meticulously planned, the result was the same, an enduring myth that still sends chills down spines today. The media frenzy around Tutankhamun's curse transformed archaeology into front-page drama, blurring the line between fact and fear. It sparked debates about ethics should the dead remain undisturbed, and left us wondering if some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. As for Howard Carter, he kept a canary in his home after the discovery. One day, he returned to find a cobra, the symbol of Egyptian royalty, coiled in its cage. The bird was gone. Coincidence maybe, but in the shadow of the pyramids, even coincidence feels like a message. The Hope Diamond isn't just a gem, it's a legend drenched in blood and bad luck. Its story begins deep in the mines of India, where it was pried from the eye of a sacred statue of the Hindu goddess Sita. The thief, a French merchant named Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, paid a gruesome price for his crime. Within months of smuggling the stone out of the country, he was torn apart by wild dogs, the first in a long line of victims claimed by the so-called curse. But the diamond's journey was just beginning. Once it reached Europe, it passed through the hands of kings and queens, leaving a trail of ruined lives in its wake. King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were among its most famous owners and its most tragic. The diamond's dazzling blue sparkle became a symbol of their extravagance, fueling the rage of the starving French populace. When the revolution came, both met the guillotine. Coincidence, perhaps, but the gem's next chapter makes you wonder. In the early 20th century, American heiress Evelyn Walsh McLean bought the diamond, flaunting it as a good luck charm. Her life spiraled into horror. Her young son died in a car crash, her daughter took her own life, and her husband abandoned her before sinking into madness. Even those who briefly handled the stone suffered. A delivery boy was crushed by a truck, and a jeweler who reset it leapt to his death. Scientists have tried to dismiss the curse as superstition, pointing to the diamond's rare boron content or the psychological power of suggestion. But the sheer volume of misery tied to it defies easy explanation. Today, the Hope Diamond sits in the Smithsonian, its curse seemingly contained behind bulletproof glass. Yet visitors still report feeling dizzy or nauseous when standing too close, as if the stone itself resents being watched. Whether curse or cosmic irony, one thing is certain: some treasures are better left untouched. Buried beneath a man-made mountain in central China lies one of history's most guarded secrets, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the ruthless unifier of China and its first emperor. While the world marvels at his terracotta army, thousands of life-sized soldiers standing in silent vigil, the emperor's actual resting place remains untouched, sealed for over 2,000 years. And for good reason. Ancient texts speak of rivers of liquid mercury, deadly traps, and a curse so potent that even modern archaeologists refuse to break the tomb's final seal. The few who have dared to get close have faced inexplicable misfortunes, fueling fears that the emperor's wrath transcends death itself. The stories begin with the tomb's construction, a project so vast it consumed 700,000 workers over decades. Historical records describe unimaginable treasures, palaces of gold, celestial maps of pearls, and an entire underground kingdom powered by flowing mercury to mimic the Yellow and Yangtze rivers. But this grandeur came with a dark purpose. The emperor, obsessed with immortality, reportedly laced his burial chamber with toxic metals to deter grave robbers. Soil tests around the tomb mound reveal mercury levels up to 100 times higher than normal, backing up the ancient accounts. Yet it's not just science that keeps researchers at bay. Local legends tell of farmers who stumbled upon terracotta fragments decades before the official excavation, only to die mysteriously within weeks. Others whisper of archaeologists who, after studying the site, suffered sudden illnesses or eerie accidents. The most chilling tale involves a team in the 1980s that attempted to explore a previously hidden chamber near the tomb's periphery. Days after breaching the outer wall, several members fell violently ill, their symptoms matching acute heavy metal poisoning. One reportedly went mad, babbling about shadows moving in the tunnels. Officially, the incidents were blamed on poor ventilation and exposure to mercury vapors. But when the Chinese government abruptly halted further excavations, citing preservation concerns, skeptics wondered if something more sinister was at play. Even today, the terracotta warriors stand as both a marvel and a warning. Their discovery was accidental. A group of farmers digging a well in 1974 struck the first clay head. Yet the tomb's heart remains inviolate, as if the emperor's curse still holds power. Modern technology could likely navigate the mercury rivers and bypass the traps. LiDAR scans and robotic probes have mapped sections of the complex, revealing a labyrinthine structure far grander than imagined. But the question lingers: is the reluctance to open Qin Shi Huang's tomb purely practical, or does the weight of 2 millennia of fear still shape history? Perhaps some doors are meant to stay shut. After all, the emperor didn't just build a burial site, he crafted an eternity, and he's waiting patiently. The year was 1973 when a team of researchers in Krakow, Poland, made a decision that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. They unsealed the tomb of King Casimir IV Jagiellon, a ruler who had lain undisturbed for 500 years. The air inside was thick with the weight of centuries, and as the stone lid slid back, a cloud of dust rose into the dim light. Within weeks, 4 of the archaeologists who had been present were dead. Others fell gravely ill, their lungs ravaged by an aggressive fungal infection. The press didn't hesitate. The curse of Casimir had struck again. But was it really a supernatural force or something far more terrestrial? The victims had all inhaled spores from Aspergillus flavus, a deadly mold that had thrived in the sealed, damp environment of the tomb. Modern science points to this as the clear culprit, a natural hazard of disturbing ancient burial sites. Yet the timing of the death, so sudden, so clustered, fed the mythos of a vengeful king. Locals whispered that Casimir, known in life for his temper, had placed a final warning on his tomb: "Woe to those who dare disturb my eternal rest." Whether those words were ever truly inscribed is lost to history, but the fear they inspired was very real. Even today, the story lingers in Krakow's folklore, a reminder that the past doesn't always yield its secrets willingly. What makes the curse of Casimir so chilling isn't just the deaths themselves, but the way science and superstition collide. Fungal spores are a known hazard in archaeology, yet no amount of rational explanation can erase the eerie symmetry, the idea that a 15th century king might have posthumously defended his grave. The researchers, trained professionals, had taken precautions, but the tomb had other plans. Some argue the mold was accidental, a byproduct of decay. Others suggest it was deliberate, a final defense mechanism crafted by Casimir's advisors. After all, this was a man who spent his life waging wars and crushing rebellions. Why would death stop him from guarding his legacy? The tragedy forced a reckoning in the archaeological community. Protocols for handling sealed tombs were rewritten, with respirators and containment suits becoming standard. But despite these advances, the shadow of the curse endures. Visitors to Wall Cathedral, where Casimir lies, still speak of a strange heaviness in the air near his tomb. Whether it's the lingering presence of Aspergillus or something less tangible, the message is clear: some graves are meant to stay closed. Science can explain the how, but the why, the uncanny precision of fate, remains shrouded in mystery. Perhaps that's the true power of curses. They don't just kill, they make us wonder. In the heart of Catherine Palace, just outside St. Petersburg, there once stood a chamber so dazzling it was called the 8th wonder of the world, the Amber Room. Walls paneled entirely in amber, gold leaf, and mirrors, crafted with such precision that the gems seemed to glow from within. A gift from Prussia to Russia in the early 18th century, it was a masterpiece beyond value. Then, in 1941, Nazi troops stormed the palace, dismantled the room panel by panel, and shipped it to Königsberg Castle. And just like that, history's most luxurious treasure vanished. But the real mystery isn't just where it went, it's what happened to everyone who tried to find it. The Nazis who looted the Amber Room were the first to pay the price. General Erich Koch, the brutal administrator overseeing the theft, survived the war but spent decades in prison, tormented by rumors that the room's curse had doomed him. Soldiers involved in its transport met grisly ends. One was crushed by a tank, another vanished during the siege of Königsberg. Even the castle where the panels were last seen mysteriously burned to the ground in 1945, taking any clues with it. Then came the post-war hunters. Georg Stein, a German researcher obsessed with tracking down the room, was found dead in a Bavarian forest in 1987. His body stabbed multiple times with a surgical precision that suggested professional execution. His notes were gone. Another investigator, former Nazi officer turned treasure hunter Gerhard Strauss, died suddenly of a heart attack just hours after claiming he'd found a crucial lead. Theories about the Amber Room's fate range from plausible to paranoid. Some say it's hidden in a secret bunker beneath Königsberg, now Kaliningrad, sealed behind Soviet-era concrete. Others insist it was smuggled to South America by fleeing Nazis, its location known only to a few who took the secret to their graves. But the darkest whispers suggest the room never left Russia at all, that Stalin's forces secretly recovered it, only to hide it away after realizing the curse was real. After all, Russian officials have repeatedly blocked excavations near rumored sites, citing safety concerns. Even in 2003, when a meticulously reconstructed Amber Room was unveiled in Catherine Palace, workers reported strange accidents, tools malfunctioning, scaffolding collapsing, as if the original shadow still loomed. Is the curse just a convenient story to explain bad luck and human greed? Maybe, but consider this: the Amber Room was built from fossilized resin, a substance ancient cultures believed trapped spirits. Its very creation was an act of alchemy, turning time into art, and time, it seems, always collects its dues. Those who sought the room weren't just chasing treasure, they were unraveling a spell. And spells, once broken, have a way of breaking back. Today, the Amber Room remains history's most beautiful ghost, a glittering reminder that some treasures aren't just lost, they're waiting. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, where the mist clings to crumbling stone, the Temple of Delphi once drew kings and beggars alike, all desperate for a glimpse into the future. The oracle, a woman known as the Pythia, would breathe in vapors rising from a crack in the earth, her body convulsing as she uttered prophecies in a voice not quite her own. But this was no divine spectacle, it was a deadly ritual. Ancient texts describe visitors who left the temple not with answers but with foaming mouths, madness, or worse. For centuries, scholars dismissed these accounts as superstition. Then, science revealed the horrifying truth. Delphi sat atop a geological nightmare, leaking gases that could kill as easily as they could inspire visions. The key to the curse lies in the temple's very foundations. Modern geologists discovered two fault lines intersecting beneath the site, a crossroads where underground springs mixed with limestone deposits. When earthquakes common in the region shifted the rocks, they released pockets of ethylene, a sweet-smelling gas known to induce euphoria, hallucinations, and, in high doses, fatal respiratory collapse. Ethylene fits the ancient descriptions perfectly. The Pythia's trances, the wreaths of laurel leaves, a natural antidote to the gas, even the peculiar scent of divine breath recorded by priests. But not everyone was so lucky. Visitors who lingered too long in the inner chambers or leaned too close to the sacred fissure would inhale lethal concentrations, their deaths attributed to Apollo's wrath. One particularly chilling account tells of a Roman general who demanded answers from the oracle while drunk. The Pythia, perhaps sensing his arrogance, refused to speak. Enraged, he stormed the inner sanctum and within hours was found convulsing on the temple steps, blood streaming from his nose. His soldiers carried him away, but he never regained his senses, babbling about phantom serpents until his death. Today, we'd recognize the symptoms of acute hydrocarbon poisoning. Back then, it was proof the gods punished the unworthy. What makes Delphi's curse so fascinating is its duality. The same gases that gifted the Pythia her visions also shielded the temple's power. Skeptics who entered scoffing at divine fumes often left as believers if they left at all. Even the priests weren't immune. Records note several high priestesses who died young, their bodies ravaged by what historians now suspect was chronic exposure. The temple's caretakers likely knew the risks, using rituals like burning laurel or limiting access to the inner chamber to mitigate the danger. But in the end, Delphi's power depended on its peril. Today, the fissure is silent, sealed by centuries of landslides, yet the land hasn't forgotten. In 2001, a team of archaeologists mapping the site reported dizziness and nausea near the temple's ruins. Sensors detected traces of carbon dioxide still seeping from the ground, a faint echo of the deadly gases that once flowed freely. It's a reminder that some places remain treacherous long after their gods have fallen silent. The oracle may be gone, but the earth beneath Delphi still whispers its warnings, and sometimes the deadliest curses aren't spoken, they're inhaled. In the summer of 1941, Soviet archaeologists made a decision that would ripple through history. They cracked open the tomb of Tamerlane, the fearsome 14th century conqueror whose name alone once made empires tremble. Nestled in Uzbekistan's Registan Square, the warlord's resting place had remained sealed for 6 centuries, its inscription carrying a dire warning: "When I rise from the dead, the world shall shake." The team, led by anthropologist Mikhail Gerasimov, dismissed it as medieval superstition. But within hours of disturbing the skeleton, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history, tearing into Soviet territory with unprecedented fury. Coincidence? Not according to the locals who had begged the scientists to leave the grave untouched. The timing was uncanny. Tamerlane's exhumation began on June 20th. By June 22nd, 3 million German troops were storming across the border, catching Stalin's forces off guard. Moscow's streets soon buzzed with whispers the curse had awakened. Among the Uzbek elders, the horror was palpable. They'd warned the team about the legend that disturbing Tamerlane's bones would unleash a war worse than any before. Even Gerasimov, a hardened scientist, later admitted feeling a strange chill as he lifted the conqueror's skull. But Stalin's regime wasn't about to entertain supernatural excuses for military failure. Facing catastrophic losses, the Soviet leader did something extraordinary. He weaponized the curse. State propaganda spun the tale to fuel patriotism. Radio broadcasts framed the invasion as a trial by fire, a test of Soviet resilience against both Nazi aggression and ancient wrath. Stalin, ever the pragmatist, saw value in myth. If soldiers believed even the ghosts of history fought beside them, why not let them? The message was clear. If we can defy Tamerlane's curse, we can crush Hitler. By 1942, as the tide of war slowly turned, Tamerlane's remains were quietly reburied with full Islamic rites, a gesture some say was orchestrated to appease the curse. Soon after, the Red Army scored its first major victory at Stalingrad. Fact or fiction, the symbolism was undeniable. But what of the scientists? Gerasimov survived the war, but others involved in the exhumation weren't as lucky. Several died in the brutal siege of Leningrad, while one perished in a freak lab accident. Even Stalin's propagandists couldn't silence the murmurs had the curse claimed its due. Modern historians point to the chaos of war as explanation enough. Yet the tomb's warning lingers in Central Asian folklore, a reminder that some leaders, even in death, refuse to be defied. Today, Tamerlane's mausoleum stands as both a monument and a caution. History's weight isn't just in bones, but in the stories we dare to awaken. The mummy's scream was frozen in time, its jaw gaping wide as if death itself had stolen its final breath mid-shriek. Discovered in 1886 in a hidden chamber near Luxor, this skeletal figure, officially labeled Unknown Man E, was anything but ordinary. Unlike the serene, carefully prepared mummies of pharaohs, this body lay contorted, hands and feet bound, its face twisted in agony. The linen wrappings were crude, the burial hasty, and the absence of traditional amulets or prayers suggested something far darker than a peaceful passing. Whoever this was, they'd been buried not with honor but with fear, and when the first archaeologists touched the remains, the curse awoke. Within months of the discovery, several team members met bizarre ends. One died of a sudden fever, his skin reportedly turning the same ashen gray as the mummies. Another vanished during an expedition, his body found weeks later in the Nile, lips pulled back in a grim mimicry of the corpse's eternal scream. Locals refused to even speak of the mummy, whispering that it carried the Naktu, an ancient Egyptian term for a soul so wronged in life that its rage bled into the afterlife. But what could have caused such a horrific death, and why would the curse linger for centuries? Forensic science offers grim clues. Modern CT scans revealed the mummy's organs were intact, ruling out traditional embalming. Worse, traces of a potent toxin, possibly hemlock or arsenic, were found in the tissues. Some scholars believe unknown man E was a nobleman executed for treason, poisoned and buried alive to silence him forever. Others point to the mummy's unnatural posture, suggesting a violent, ritualistic killing, perhaps even a sacrificial offering gone wrong. The most chilling theory. That the scream wasn't metaphorical. Vocal cords frozen in rigor mortis hint at a death so agonizing, the final cry was literally etched into the body. Yet the curse outlives the science. In 1974, a museum curator in Cairo reportedly heard wailing from the mummy's display case late at night. Security footage showed nothing, but the next morning the glass was cracked from the inside. More recently, a team of researchers studying the remains experienced shared nightmares of drowning, their sleep filled with visions of bound limbs and a voice hissing in Old Egyptian. Coincidence, maybe, but when the past leaves this many scars, it's hard not to wonder if some wounds never heal. The screaming mummy doesn't just defy explanation, it defies peace. And for those who dare to listen, its story is far from over. Deep in the arid valleys of northern Peru, a team of archaeologists stumbled upon a tomb in 1953 that would rewrite history and leave a trail of broken lives in its wake. The discovery seemed miraculous, a burial chamber filled with the remains of noblemen from the ancient Moche civilization, each skeleton fitted with intricate silver prosthetics where their hands should have been. These weren't mere decorations, the craftsmanship was surgical, the joints articulated to mimic movement, yet beneath the glint of precious metal lay something far darker. The locals had warned the team about the place. They called it Huaca de los Manos Malditas, the shrine of the cursed hands. The archaeologists laughed it off until the digging began. Days after unsealing the tomb, the expedition's photographer, Carlos Mendes, developed the first photos of the silver-handed skeletons, only to find his own shadowy figure standing among the bones in every shot, despite being alone in the chamber. Within a week, he was dead, his body found at the base of a cliff with his camera still clutched in his grip. The film inside melted into a blackened swirl. Then came the others. The team's lead anthropologist, Dr. Elena Varga, began complaining of phantom pains in her fingers, her joints locking into claw-like positions mirroring the prosthetics she'd studied. Medical tests showed nothing, yet within months she succumbed to a sudden stroke, her hands twisted into unnatural angles at the moment of death. Local Moche descendants insisted the curse had teeth. Their ancestors, they explained, believed amputation was a punishment reserved for thieves and oath-breakers. The silver hands weren't honors, they were eternal shackles, branding the dead as criminals doomed to guard their own tombs. Disturbing them was an affront to justice itself. The archaeologists dismissed it as folklore, but the excavation's records tell a different story. One journal entry describes a night watchman fleeing camp after hearing metallic clicks in the dark, like fingers tapping on stone. Another recounts how a crate of silver hands shipped to a Lima museum arrived empty, the lid still sealed. Modern historians speculate that the Moche elite may have used toxins, mercury or plant-based poisons to coat their tombs, punishing grave robbers. Yet no chemical analysis explains the eerie precision of the deaths, each victim mirroring the skeleton's fates. The lone survivor, a young intern named Lewis, abandoned archaeology entirely. Decades later, he confessed in an interview that he'd kept one silver finger as a souvenir, only to wake nights feeling something cold and metallic closing around his wrist. The tomb's final insult, the site itself vanished. A landslide in 1956 buried it completely, as if the earth itself had clenched shut. Today, the silver hands exist only in sketches and fractured memories. But in northern Peru, when the moon is high, some swear they still hear the faint chime of metal against bone. It's not a warning, it's an invitation. The Black Prince's ruby isn't a ruby at all, it's a blood-red spinel, uncut and roughly the size of a chicken egg, set prominently in the British imperial state crown. But its misnomer is the least of its mysteries. This gem has sailed through history like a cursed comet, leaving wreckage in its wake, its first documented victim. Henry V, who wore it into the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. As the French cavalry charged, their axes found the king's helmet, cleaving through the metal and nearly taking his head, except the blow landed square on the ruby. Henry survived, but the stone's reputation as both protector and omen was sealed. For centuries, the gem passed through hands slick with ambition and blood. Edward of Woodstock, the Black Prince himself, received it in 1367 as payment for helping a deposed Spanish king reclaim his throne. Within months, Edward was dead at 45, his body ravaged by dysentery, a grim end for a warrior who'd never lost a battle. Then came Richard III, who allegedly wore the ruby at Bosworth Field in 1485. Legend claims it tumbled from his crown as he was struck down, only to be plucked from the mud by Henry VII's troops. Coincidence, maybe, but the pattern was hard to ignore. Even when not worn into battle, the stone seemed to radiate misfortune. Henry VIII gifted it to Catherine of Aragon, whose marriage crumbled into one of history's most infamous divorces. Later, it adorned Elizabeth I, who survived assassination plots and rebellion but died without an heir, plunging England into succession chaos. By the time Oliver Cromwell seized the crown jewels during the English Civil War, the ruby's curse had become law, so much so that when Cromwell's Puritan government sold it off to a pawnbroker, the man reportedly returned it within weeks, claiming his wife had gone blind and his children fallen ill. Science offers a skeptic's rebuttal. Spinels aren't inherently dangerous and royal life was always perilous, but then there's the 20th century. In 1937, the stone narrowly avoided being aboard the doomed R-101 airship when a last-minute decision removed it from an exhibition shipment. Decades later, a Tower of London guard swore he saw the gem glow like an ember the night before the 1974 IRA bombing that damaged the Jewel House. Even today, conservators whisper about the ruby's uncanny weight, how it feels heavier in the hand during times of national crisis, as if absorbing the tension in the air. Is the Black Prince's ruby cursed or just a mirror for human drama? Perhaps it's both. Gems like this carry more than light. They refract the fears and ambitions of those who possess them. The stone didn't cause wars or betrayals, but its presence at pivotal moments makes it a lightning rod for legend. And in the echoing halls of Westminster, where history leans close to myth, some truths don't need proof. They just need a witness. The Lycurgus cup doesn't just catch the light, it changes it. This 4th century Roman chalice, carved from a single block of glass, shifts from a serene jade green when lit from the front to a forbidding blood red when backlit. For centuries, this eerie transformation was dismissed as a trick of the eye until modern science revealed something astonishing. The glass contains gold and silver nanoparticles, an ancient form of nanotechnology that manipulates light at a molecular level. But the real mystery isn't how the cup works, it's why every known owner in the 19th century met a gruesome end. The cup's name comes from its intricate design, depicting the mythical king Lycurgus of Thrace ensnared by vines as punishment for defying the god Dionysus. It's a scene of divine retribution, and history suggests the imagery wasn't just decorative. The first documented private owner, a French aristocrat named Baron Jérôme de Pontécoulant, acquired the cup in 1845 after it was unearthed near Rome. Within a year, he was found dead in his study, his face frozen in terror, the cup clutched in his hands. The official cause was a heart attack, but servants swore the glass had glowed crimson the night before, as if filled with wine. But no one had poured any. The cup's next keeper, British collector Lord Arundel, dismissed the rumors as superstitious nonsense until his prized collection began to unravel. Fire destroyed part of his estate, thieves stole artifacts, and his health deteriorated rapidly. On his deathbed, he reportedly ordered the cup sold, calling it a jewel that bites. By the time it reached the hands of German banker Gustav von Kessel in 1873, its reputation was sealed. Von Kessel, a skeptic, displayed it prominently in his Berlin mansion. Then, one by one, his children fell ill with unexplained fevers. His youngest daughter, who'd often been caught staring at the cup, whispered before her death that the man in the glass had touched her. Von Kessel donated the cup to the British Museum by 1890, where it remains today behind reinforced glass, as if the curators themselves aren't taking chances. Scientists marvel at the cup's craftsmanship, estimating that its creators would have needed to grind gold into particles 1,000 times smaller than a grain of salt, a feat supposedly impossible without microscopes. Some theorize the Romans stumbled upon the recipe by accident, perhaps contaminating molten glass with gold dust. Others suggest the knowledge came from somewhere darker. Ancient texts speak of Alexandrian alchemists who could trap sunlight in glass, and the cup's Dionysian theme hints at ritual significance. Was it a ceremonial object designed to reveal the presence of poison by changing color? Or something more sinister, a vessel meant to channel divine wrath? The British Museum insists the cup is safe, now that it's shielded from direct handling. Yet oddities persist. Security logs note motion sensors triggering near its case at odd hours, even when no one's there. Conservators report that the glass occasionally resists cleaning as if repelling touch. And in 2019, a visitor's photo captured a shadowy figure reflected in the cup's surface, a distortion the museum blamed on lens flare, though no light source matched the angle. Whether curse or coincidence, the Lycurgus cup remains a paradox, a marvel of ancient science that defies explanation, and a relic that seems to resent being seen. Perhaps some creations aren't meant to be understood, they're meant to be feared. Beneath the quiet waters of Lake Mälaren in Sweden, archaeologists made a discovery that sent chills through the scientific community, a burial site unlike any other. Known as the Tomb of the Sunken Skulls, this ancient grave held 11 decapitated heads, each carefully arranged on wooden stakes at the bottom of what was once a dry pit. The skulls, dating back over 8,000 years, belonged to men, women, and even children, their bones weathered by time but their silent screams preserved in the mud. At first, researchers assumed this was a battle site or a mass execution. But when the excavation team began falling ill with unexplainable fevers, hallucinations, and sudden skin lesions, the whispers began. Had they disturbed something that should have stayed hidden? Local folklore tells of a Norse legend tied to this very lake, a tale of treachery and a curse so potent it demanded blood. According to the myth, a clan of early Scandinavians violated sacred burial laws, beheading their enemies and displaying the skulls as trophies to disgrace the dead. The gods, enraged by this disrespect, condemned the killers to the same fate, sinking their settlement beneath the lake's waters. Modern archaeologists scoffed at the idea of curses, attributing the illnesses to bacteria or contaminated groundwater. Yet the timing was unsettling. The expedition's lead researcher, Dr. Erik Lundström, developed a persistent cough that turned into pneumonia within weeks of handling the skulls. Another team member reported waking to the sound of gurgling whispers near the site despite being alone. The most chilling detail, forensic analysis revealed the skulls hadn't been severed in battle. The cuts were precise, ritualistic, consistent with sacrificial practices described in Viking sagas. Some bore marks of healing, suggesting the victims had lived for years after initial wounds, only to be ritually killed later. Even more eerie, pollen samples from the pit indicated the skulls had been displayed among blossoming flowers, a practice linked to Norse death cults that believed severed heads could channel spirits. Were the archaeologists now channeling something themselves? After the team packed up, the strangeness followed. A lab technician in Stockholm, tasked with cataloging the skulls, claimed the specimens emitted a low hum when placed near recording devices. Static-laced audio from the site captured what sounded like chanting, though no such language exists in known Norse dialects. The final blow came when the original excavation photos, crisp and clear upon taking, developed with blurred faces, as if the skulls had moved when no one was looking. Today, the Tomb of the Sunken Skulls remains one of Sweden's most guarded secrets, its artifacts locked away with strict handling protocols. The official explanation cites public sensitivity. But those who were there know better. Some doors aren't just closed for preservation, they're closed for protection, because in the depths of Lake Mälaren, the past isn't dead. It's waiting. The Dresden Codex gleamed under the dim lamplight of the Royal Library of Saxony, its delicate bark paper pages covered in intricate glyphs and celestial calculations. It was the most intact of all surviving Mayan manuscripts, a treasure rescued from the fires of Spanish conquest, yet those who studied its secrets too closely seemed to inherit a legacy of misfortune. The first victim was Ernst Försterman, the 19th-century librarian who dedicated decades to decoding its pages. He became obsessed with the Codex's precise Venus tables, convinced they held keys to the Mayan cosmos. Then, in 1899, just months after publishing his groundbreaking work, he was found dead at his desk, a half-finished translation before him. The official cause was heart failure, but whispers spread through academic circles. Had he unlocked something never meant for modern eyes? What makes the Dresden Codex's curse so unnerving is the collision between colonial fear and scientific wonder. Spanish friars who first encountered Mayan texts in the 16th century burned them as devil's work, terrified of the astronomical precision within. They spun tales of cursed scribes and priests who'd bargained with underworld gods for knowledge. Yet the Codex itself contains no spells or hexes, just breathtakingly accurate charts of lunar cycles, eclipses, and planetary movements that still stump historians with their sophistication. So why the deaths? In 1912, an American anthropologist named Charles Bowditch suffered a sudden mental collapse after studying the Codex's numeric systems, screaming about faces in the numbers before being institutionalized. Decades later, Soviet linguist Yuri Norizov, credited with cracking the Mayan script's phonetic code, reportedly refused to handle the original manuscript, warning colleagues it carried the weight of the stars. Science offers a pragmatic explanation. The Codex's red ink contains cinnabar, a mercury-based pigment toxic to touch. Prolonged exposure could explain tremors, psychosis, or organ failure in researchers who pored over its pages. But that doesn't account for the eerie timing. In 1945, a British cryptographer working on the Codex's mathematical sequences died the night Dresden was firebombed, his notes vanishing in the flames along with the library's east wing where the manuscript was stored. Miraculously, the Codex survived unscathed, found days later in the rubble. Even today, digital archivists report corrupted files and system crashes when attempting high-resolution scans, as if the text resists reproduction. Perhaps the true curse lies in the Codex's revelations. Its rain almanacs and eclipse warnings suggest the Mayans didn't just predict celestial events, they believed they could influence them. That kind of knowledge is intoxicating, dangerous. It tempts scholars to play God, chasing secrets wrapped in the language of stars. The Dresden Codex doesn't kill, it reveals. And for those who peer too deep into its calculations, the price isn't superstition, it's the unbearable weight of seeing time itself laid bare. High in the thin air of the Bolivian Andes, where the sky presses down like a weight, the ruins of Tiahuanaco sprawl across the Altiplano, a maze of carved monoliths and toppled temples older than legend itself. When a team of international archaeologists arrived in 1964 to study this pre-Incan marvel, they were warned by local Aymara elders, the stones remember. The scientists chuckled, dismissing it as native superstition, but within weeks the expedition unraveled in a spiral of sickness, sabotage, and paranoia so intense it became a cautionary tale whispered in universities for decades. It started with the altitude. At nearly 13,000 feet, oxygen deprivation is a given: headaches, nausea, the constant gasp for breath. But team members reported symptoms far stranger: vivid nightmares of being crushed beneath fallen statues, waking to find their tents slashed open from the inside, and a creeping sense of being watched by the stone faces carved into the ruins. Then came the infighting. Petty disagreements over excavation methods exploded into screaming matches. Tools vanished, field notes were burned. The team's lead epigrapher, Dr. Hugo Schneider, swore someone tampered with his translations of the glyphs, shifting symbols overnight to spell out warnings in a dialect not spoken for centuries. They're angry, he scrawled in his final journal entry before abandoning the site. The dead don't like to be read. Local Aymara guides refused to enter the Kalasasaya temple after sundown, insisting the Cholpas, spirits of the ancient builders, still walked its corridors. They spoke of prior interlopers who'd stolen artifacts in the 1920s, only to die choking on highland dust, their lungs filling with a black silt that matched the volcanic soil of Tiahuanaco. The archaeologists dismissed it as silicosis, a hazard of the dry climate. But when a junior researcher sneaked into the temple at night to prove the stories false, he was found at dawn curled beneath the monolithic gateway of the sun, his hair bleached white and his fingers clutching a handful of carved stone eyes, artifacts no one had unearthed that season. He couldn't remember how they got there. The expedition collapsed soon after. Equipment failed inexplicably. Funds mysteriously vanished. The final straw came when a landslide buried their largest trench, nearly taking 3 team members with it. As they fled, the Aymara elders met them at the edge of the ruins, their faces unreadable. "We told you," one said, pointing to the Akapana pyramid, where the morning sun cast a shadow like a pointing finger directly at their retreating jeeps. Modern scholars still debate what happened. Some blame the altitude's psychological toll. Others cite toxic minerals in the dust or the stresses of isolation. But the Aymara know better. Tiahuanaco wasn't just a city, it was a living map of the cosmos, its stones aligned with stars and solstices. Disturbing them wasn't archaeology, it was sacrilege. Today, the ruins stand quieter than ever. Visitors report cameras malfunctioning near the sunken temple, recordings picking up faint drumming where no drums exist. And sometimes, when the wind howls through the gateway of the sun, it doesn't sound like wind at all. It sounds like breathing. The archaeologists should have known something was wrong when the jade shards began to glow. It was 2006, and deep in China's Henan province, a team had just cracked open the 2,000-year-old tomb of Liu He, infamously known as the Jade Prince, a disgraced Han Dynasty noble buried in a suit of 4,000 intricately woven jade plates. The discovery was unprecedented. Jade burial suits were reserved for emperors, yet here was a prince stripped of his titles, clad in stolen honor. As the team lifted the first fragments, cameras captured an eerie greenish hue pulsing beneath the dust. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Zhu Wei, shrugged it off as a trick of the light. Within 48 hours, he was vomiting blood. Forensic analysis later revealed the jade had been treated with cinnabar and arsenic, common Han Dynasty preservatives meant to deter grave robbers. But the levels were off the charts, as if the tomb's architects had laced each plate with lethal intent. Zhu's decline was swift and brutal. His skin turned sallow, his hair fell out in clumps, and his final journal entries, scribbled between feverish hallucinations, described jade voices whispering in a dialect dead for millennia. Authorities quarantined the site, blaming toxic exposure. Yet local villagers whose ancestors had guarded the tomb's location for generations told a different story. Liu, he wasn't just buried in jade, he was imprisoned by it. The prince's history reads like a curse itself. Demoted for treason, his name erased from imperial records, Liu, he was rumored to have dabbled in dark rituals to reclaim power. His tomb's layout defied tradition. The jade suit wasn't just armor but a literal straitjacket, its plates stitched together with gold wire in a pattern resembling a prison grid. Worse, the burial chamber's walls were carved with repeated symbols for silence and forgetting. Was this a punishment from the emperor, or had the prince willingly entombed himself with something far older? The few surviving records hint at Liu, his obsession with life-stealing jade, a mythical substance said to trap souls. Jade in Chinese cosmology is more than a stone, it's a bridge between worlds. The Han dynasty believed it could preserve flesh but also contain spirits. When Dr. Zhu's autopsy revealed his bone marrow had crystallized, taking on a glassy, greenish sheen, even the most skeptical pathologists hesitated. Coincidence doesn't explain why 3 other team members developed identical symptoms despite minimal contact. Today, the tomb is sealed under layers of concrete, its remaining artifacts locked in a high-security vault. The official report cites public safety concerns, but the truth lingers in the silence of that vault. No alarms have ever been tripped, yet guards report hearing the faint chime of jade plates shifting in the dark. Not rattling, not falling, shifting as if rearranging themselves into something new. The prince may have stolen his burial rites, but the jade was always meant to be there. And it's still working. The Sibylline books weren't just ancient texts, they were Rome's doomsday clock, a collection of prophecies so potent that even emperors trembled at their whispers. According to legend, these cryptic scrolls were sold to Rome's last king, Tarquin the Proud, by a mysterious old woman who burned 3 of the original 9 books right before his eyes, demanding the same price for what remained. When he refused, she burned 3 more. By the time he relented, only a handful of oracles survived, their verses crammed with apocalyptic warnings and riddles that would shape the fate of an empire. Guarded in the temple of Jupiter, the books were consulted only in moments of crisis, but those who dared to misuse them paid a price steeped in blood and fire. Take the infamous case of Emperor Augustus, who, in a bid to cement his power, ordered the books copied and redistributed across the empire. It was a political masterstroke until the original manuscripts inexplicably vanished from their sanctum, and Rome's granaries burned to the ground in the same week. The Senate scrambled to interpret the disaster as divine wrath, blaming Augustus' arrogance. Then there was the doomed priest Lucius Cornelius, tasked with reading the books during the civil wars of the 1st century. He emerged from the temple pale and trembling, whispering of a prophecy so horrifying he refused to repeat it. Days later, he was found dead in the Tiber, his tongue cut out. Coincidence? The Romans didn't think so. What made these prophecies so dangerous wasn't just their content, it was how easily they could be weaponized. The book's keepers, the quindecimviri, held immense power as their interpretations could justify anything from war to purges. When Rome faced Hannibal's invasion, the books demanded a foreign king's blood to avert disaster. The Senate seized on the verse, sacrificing 2 Greeks and 2 Gauls alive in the Forum. Victory followed, cementing the book's fearsome reputation. But later, under Nero, the same verses were twisted to condemn Christians to the lions, proving how fluid and fatal their words could be. Even the book's destruction carried echoes of the curse. When the Temple of Jupiter burned in 83 BC, the scrolls were lost and Rome plunged into decades of chaos: Sulla's purges, Spartacus' revolt, the collapse of the Republic. Later attempts to reconstruct the text from fragments scattered across the empire only deepened the mystery. Copies surfaced in Constantinople, Syria, even Egypt, each edition subtly altered to suit new rulers. The Byzantine Emperor Julian the Apostate was the last known holder of a surviving fragment. He died months later on a Persian battlefield, clutching a wound in his abdomen precisely where a Sibylline verse had allegedly warned, "The flame eater shall fall." Today, scholars debate whether the Sibylline books were ever truly prophetic or simply brilliant political tools, their vagueness a blank slate for power-hungry men. But one chilling detail endures: the originals were said to be written on palm leaves, a material that crumbles to dust when exposed to air. Perhaps that was the real curse, not the prophecies themselves, but humanity's inability to leave well enough alone. The books promised answers, but like all oracles, they reflected the fears of those who sought them. And in Rome's case, those fears had a habit of coming true. From the sky, the Nazca Lines form a sprawling gallery of ancient wonders: giant spiders, hummingbirds, and geometric shapes etched into Peru's desert floor over 2,000 years ago. But for those who have dared to study them too closely, these geoglyphs have become more than just archaeological puzzles. They're a death sentence. The first warning came in the 1970s when a small plane carrying researcher Maria Reich, known as the Lady of the Lines, for her decades of work documenting the figures, mysteriously lost altitude and crash-landed near the famous hummingbird glyph. Reich survived, but with injuries so severe she spent the rest of her life in a wheelchair. Locals nodded knowingly. They'd long warned that the lines weren't just art, they were conduits for something far older and far more dangerous. Then the deaths began in earnest. In 2008, pilot Edson Solka and his entire survey team plummeted from a clear sky while mapping previously undiscovered lines, their plane's black box recording no mechanical failures. A year later, archaeologist Marcus Riendel's helicopter engine failed mid-flight near the colossal monkey glyph, forcing an emergency landing that left 2 crew members with broken spines. Even ground expeditions weren't spared. Geologist David Johnson collapsed suddenly from cardiac arrest while studying underground water channels beneath the lines. His last words scribbled in his notebook: "They're not drawings. They're drains." The pattern was impossible to ignore. Scientists began whispering about the Nazca curse, a phenomenon where those who disrupted the lines, whether by foot or by air, met with freak accidents. So what's really behind these tragedies? Some theories point to the desert itself. The Nazca Plateau sits atop one of Earth's most volatile electromagnetic fields, with natural energy currents that can interfere with aircraft instruments. Others suggest the lines function as ancient energy traps, designed to harness or deflect unseen forces, whether as part of ritual astronomy, water divination, or something far less understood. Then there's the extraterrestrial angle. UFO enthusiasts argue the glyphs served as landing markers for otherworldly visitors, protected by technology beyond our comprehension. Locals tell darker stories still. They speak of Viracocha's wrath, a punishment from the creator god for trespassing on sacred ground. The most chilling evidence comes from the lines themselves. Infrared imaging reveals subterranean tunnels crisscrossing beneath the glyphs, their walls lined with quartz, a mineral known to amplify electromagnetic energy. Even more unsettling, the shapes align not just with constellations but with seismic fault lines. Were the Nazca people marking something or guarding it? Modern researchers now use drones to avoid direct contact, but the accidents haven't stopped. In 2019, a documentary cruise drone malfunctioned mid-flight above the spider glyph, its footage capturing a split-second flash of light before the screen went black. When they recovered the wreckage, the memory card was fused shut. Whatever hides in those sands doesn't want to be seen, and if the desert's victims are any indication, it's willing to fight back. The mystery of Oak Island's money pit begins with a single rumor, a phantom treasure buried so deep and protected so fiercely that no one who seeks it leaves unscathed. Since the late 1700s, hunters have flocked to this tiny island off Nova Scotia, lured by tales of pirate gold, lost manuscripts, and even the Holy Grail. But the real story isn't what might lie beneath the earth, it's the staggering price paid by those who have tried to find it. The first recorded victim, a teenager named Daniel McGinnis, stumbled upon a peculiar depression in the ground in 1795. Along with two friends, he started digging, uncovering layers of oak logs, coconut fiber, and strange symbols carved into the rock. Then, at around 90 feet, the pit flooded violently, as if the sea itself were guarding its secrets. That was just the beginning. Over the next 2 centuries, expeditions sank fortunes into the pit literally. The more they dug, the more elaborate the traps became. Tunnels flooded with seawater, shafts collapsed without warning, workers drowned in sudden underground geysers. In 1861, the Oak Island Association brought in steam pumps to combat the flooding, only for the boiler to explode, killing 1 man and maiming several others. Then there was the tragic case of Maynard Kaiser in 1897, who fell to his death when a rope snapped mysteriously over the pit. Even modern hunters haven't been spared. In 1965, 4 men, including treasure seeker Robert Ristall and his son, succumbed to carbon monoxide poisoning in a tunnel, their bodies found slumped near a rusted ladder. Locals called it the curse's toll, but is it really a curse or just a case of brutal engineering? Skeptics point to the pit's ingenious design, possibly the work of pirates or even rogue Templars. The flooding tunnels, simple countermeasures like the man-made box drains discovered in the 1970s, designed to trigger seawater infiltration the moment the treasure chamber was breached. The collapses are unstable glacial till soil, prone to shifting under pressure. Even the infamous metal object detected by early excavators, rumored to be a chest of gold, could just be a discarded drill bit from a failed 19th century operation. Yet the coincidences pile up like the pit's own layers. Financial ruin follows nearly every major expedition. The Ristall family lost everything. Prominent investor Franklin Roosevelt, before his presidency, nearly bankrupted himself backing a failed dig. Even today, the Lagina brothers, stars of the History Channel's The Curse of Oak Island, have spent millions uncovering tantalizing clues: medieval coins, Roman swords, human bones, but no treasure. And still, the island takes its pound of flesh. Workers report eerie malfunctions, equipment failing at critical moments, cameras capturing shadowy figures near the pit when no one's there. Perhaps the real curse isn't supernatural, it's obsession. The money pit doesn't kill with ghosts or hexes. It lures seekers deeper, promising answers just beyond the next dig. And in that way, it's the perfect trap. Whether by design or destiny, Oak Island's greatest treasure might be the lesson it imparts. Some secrets aren't meant to be uncovered. Or worse, they've already been taken, and what remains is just the echo of a warning carved into the earth itself. The villagers near Xi'an had warned the archaeologists for years: dig too close to Qin Shi Huang's tomb and you'd wake more than dust. But in 1976, when workers uncovered a series of mass graves just a mile from the emperor's burial mound, the scale of the horror silenced even the skeptics. These weren't ordinary burial pits. They contained the skeletons of hundreds of young women, their bones arranged in precise, almost artistic patterns, some curled as if in sleep, others contorted in agony. Forensic analysis revealed many had been buried alive, their mouths stretched open in silent screams, and when the researchers began cataloging the remains, the whispers started. Tools vanished overnight, cameras malfunctioned only near certain skeletons, then came the dreams. Team leader Dr. Li Jian was the first to admit something was wrong. He described waking to the sound of faint singing, a melody he later identified as an ancient Qin dynasty funeral dirge, one no living person could have known. Others reported phantom touches on their shoulders or sudden chills in the pit's stagnant air. But the real terror began when the death started. A junior archaeologist, Zhang Wei, drowned in just 3 inches of rainwater after slipping near the excavation site, an impossible accident. Another researcher, Wang Lina, developed a rapid-onset dementia, her final journal entries scribbled in a script resembling Qin-era seal characters. The official reports blamed stress and coincidence. The villagers knew better. Historical records hint at why these spirits might be restless. Qin Shi Huang, consumed by paranoia, ordered the execution of all his concubines upon his death, not just to accompany him to the afterlife, but to ensure none could reveal the secrets of his tomb. Some accounts claim the women were poisoned, others describe slow suffocation in lacquered coffins, but the mass graves near the tomb suggest something even darker. The skeletons show signs of prolonged torture, broken fingers, filed teeth, and in some cases evidence of flaying. These weren't mere sacrifices, they were messages. The emperor didn't just want his concubines dead, he wanted them to suffer eternally. Modern excavations have since uncovered similar pits filled with terracotta musicians and acrobats, artisans presumably killed to perform for the emperor in death. But the concubines' graves are different. Soil tests reveal abnormally high mercury levels, matching the toxic rivers in Qin Shi Huang's main tomb. Worse, the positioning of the bodies suggests they were arranged post-mortem, their limbs moved into ritualistic poses. Local legends speak of Taoist priests binding the women's souls to the site through cursed talismans, ensuring they'd guard the tomb's secrets forever. The most chilling evidence of the curse's power came decades later. In 2014, a team using ground-penetrating radar near the concubine pits detected anomalous heat signatures, phantom body temperatures where no living thing could exist. When they tried to document it, their equipment short-circuited, leaving behind audio recordings of faint, overlapping whispers in Old Chinese. Linguists identified one phrase repeated like a mantra: "We were his and so are you." Today, the site remains off-limits to all but the most essential research, because some doors once opened can't be closed, and some ghosts don't just want to be remembered. They want revenge. The Voynich manuscript doesn't just resist translation, it devours those who attempt it. This bizarre, illustrated book, filled with looping, alien script and drawings of unidentifiable plants, celestial charts, and naked women bathing in emerald green liquid, has baffled scholars for centuries. But for some, the mystery became an obsession and then a death sentence. Take William Romain Newbold, a University of Pennsylvania philosopher who dedicated years to cracking the code in the early 20th century. Convinced he'd uncovered microscopic shorthand hidden in the manuscript's ink strokes, he published his findings to worldwide acclaim only to spiral into paranoia, claiming sinister forces were altering the text to discredit him. He died in 1926, his reputation in ruins, his final notes scribbled in a cipher even his colleagues couldn't decipher. Then there was Joseph Martin Feely, a cryptanalyst who became convinced the manuscript was the work of Roger Bacon, a 13th century alchemist. Feely's breakthrough came in 1943 when he claimed the text was encoded Latin, revealing herbal secrets too dangerous for the uninitiated. Weeks later, he was found dead in his study, his desk littered with papers referencing transmutations and forbidden formulae. The official cause was heart failure, but fellow researchers noted eerie details. His fingers stained green, matching the manuscript's mysterious ink, and his final scrawled warning: "The plants are not plants." Even modern codebreakers haven't escaped the pattern. In 1969, Prescott Currier, a naval linguist, identified 2 distinct handwriting styles in the manuscript, suggesting multiple authors. His discovery reignited interest in the text until he abruptly quit the project, refusing to discuss it further. colleagues said he'd grown increasingly agitated, muttering about voices in the glyphs. He died less than a year later, leaving behind a sealed envelope marked "Do not open until the cipher is broken." To this day, no one knows what it contains. So what makes this book so deadly? Skeptics argue the deaths are coincidental, the result of overwork or the toxic allure of an unsolvable puzzle. After all, the manuscript's vellum has been carbon dated to the early 15th century, and its ink contains common iron gall compounds. Yet other details defy explanation. Spectral imaging reveals faint, layered text beneath the visible writing, as if the original words were scraped away and replaced. Some illustrations depict botanical specimens that don't match any known species unless they're encrypted representations of something else entirely. The most chilling theory comes from medieval folklore, which speaks of grimoires that bite back, books designed to protect arcane knowledge by driving readers mad. If the Voynich manuscript is one such text, its curse might not be supernatural but psychological, a labyrinth of recursive ciphers and red herrings engineered to break the mind. Or perhaps, like the concubines of Qin Shi Huang's tomb, its secrets were never meant to be uncovered. Today, the manuscript sits quietly in Yale's Banach Library, its pages still turning away solutions. But in the margins of history, the whispers persist. Some codes aren't puzzles, they're traps. The workers called it La Maldición de la Serpiente, the curse of the serpent. Deep beneath the pyramid of the feathered serpent in Teotihuacan, Mexico, archaeologists in the 1980s uncovered a tunnel sealed for 1,500 years, its walls lined with shimmering mercury and its floor littered with the bones of sacrificial victims. The air was thick with the weight of history, but also something darker. Within weeks of breaching the tunnel, team members began falling ill. Unexplained rashes spread across their skin. Migraines struck without warning. One researcher, Pablo Garcia, swore he heard whispers in Nahuatl, the dead language of Teotihuacan's builders, echoing from the depths, chanting a single phrase: "Quetzalcoatl guards his house." Then came the accidents. A rope snapped during a descent into the tunnel, sending 2 workers plummeting onto jagged obsidian shards below. Another team member, tasked with cataloging artifacts, developed a sudden allergy to the very dust of the site, his throat swelling shut until he was forced to abandon the project. The final blow came when the lead archaeologist, Sergio Gomez, was nearly buried alive by a collapsing section of the tunnel. He survived, but locals saw the incident as confirmation of what they'd warned all along. The feathered serpent demanded reverence. Science offers cold comfort in the face of such events. Tests revealed the tunnel's mercury pools, used by the Teotihuacanos to symbolize sacred rivers of the underworld, had evaporated over centuries, leaving behind toxic residue. The obsidian fragments, likely ritual offerings, their razor edges still lethal after millennia. But no lab report explains why the curse seemed to target those who took artifacts. A volunteer who pocketed a jade bead was found days later, his hotel room strewn with feathers, real feathers, though no birds had been inside. When he returned the bead, his symptoms vanished. Local lore paints a starker picture. Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent god, wasn't just a deity to the Teotihuacanos, he was the architect of time itself. Disturbing his temple wasn't trespassing, it was blasphemy. Elders speak of tonally, the life force said to linger in sacred objects, and how stealing it invites disaster. Modern excavations now incorporate ritual cleansings and offerings, a grudging marriage of archaeology and tradition. Yet the tunnel's deepest chamber remains unexplored, its entrance blocked by a 2-ton stone door carved with serpentine glyphs. Laser scans suggest something lies behind it, a throne, a tomb, but the team refuses to proceed without blessing from local shamans. Perhaps the real curse isn't supernatural vengeance but the weight of disrespect. The Teotihuacanos didn't build traps, they built warnings. Mercury wasn't just a symbol, it was a barrier. obsidian wasn't merely ritual, it was a blade turned toward the greedy. Today, visitors to the tunnel's mouth report a metallic taste in the air, like blood or lightning. The workers no longer call it a curse, they call it a lesson. And sometimes the past doesn't need magic to defend itself. Sometimes history is weapon enough. In the frozen wastes of Siberia, where the permafrost holds secrets older than memory, a team of Russian archaeologists made a discovery in 1992 that would unravel their sanity. Buried beneath a crumbling kurgan, a burial mound sacred to the indigenous Altai people, lay the mummified remains of a figure unlike any other. Cloaked in elaborate tattoos of mythical beasts and clutching a drum made of human skin, this was no ordinary corpse. The local elders called him a Kamlani, a shaman who had walked between worlds. The archaeologists, giddy with scientific curiosity, ignored the villagers' pleas to leave the grave untouched. By the time they realized their mistake, it was far too late. The first sign something was wrong came when the team began experiencing identical nightmares, visions of a shadowy figure beating a drum in their tents, its rhythm syncing with their heartbeats until they woke in a cold sweat. Then the hallucinations crept into daylight. Lead researcher Dr. Anatoly Ivanov reported seeing the shaman's tattoos slither across his own arms, though mirrors showed nothing. Another team member, a botanist named Nadia Volkova, swore she could hear chanting in a language she'd never learned, yet somehow understood. "He's angry," she scribbled in her journal days before vanishing into the taiga. Her body was found weeks later, perfectly preserved by the cold. Her lips blue not from frost but from what the autopsy called acute oxygen deprivation, as if something had stolen her breath. Forensic analysis of the mummy later revealed the probable, if unsettling, culprit. The shaman's body had been stuffed with a toxic cocktail of psychoactive plants, including fly agaric mushrooms and Siberian rosemary, both known to induce trances or poisoning depending on the dose. The team's tents, pitched directly over the excavation site, had unknowingly been leaching these ancient toxins from the thawing soil. But science struggles to explain why only those who handled the shaman's drum fell ill while others merely heard its phantom beats. Or why Ivanov's final field notes, written in a shaky hand, describe the mummy's eyes opening in the lab, not rotting flesh but alive, watching. Local Altai shamans, when pressed, told stories of their ancestors, binding vengeful spirits to objects to protect sacred ground. The drum, they claimed, wasn't just an artifact, it was a prison. Disturbing it had unleashed something that couldn't be reburied. Modern archaeologists now wear hazmat suits when handling the mummy, stored in a special freezer at the Novosibirsk Institute. Yet janitors avoid the room after dark, reporting a sound like rhythmic knocking from inside the vault. Not tapping, not scraping, knocking like a drumbeat. And in Siberia, where the wind howls through the valleys, some say it's not the wind at all, it's an echo of the shaman's final warning. Some doors between worlds should stay shut. Because not all curses are meant to kill, some are meant to teach, and the lesson here is simple: the past doesn't just remember, it watches. The so-called Baghdad battery sits quietly in a museum display case, a humble clay jar no bigger than a fist, its copper cylinder and iron rod nestled inside like artifacts from a forgotten science experiment. Discovered in 1936 near Qujat Rabu, Iraq, this 2,000-year-old relic has sparked debates for decades. Was it an ancient power source, a religious object, or something far more sinister? Because those who have dared to study it too closely have met fates as bizarre as the artifact itself. German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, the first to theorize the jar might have been a primitive battery, died under murky circumstances during World War II, his notes on the object vanishing amid the chaos of bombings and regime shifts. Then came the team from the University of Pennsylvania who attempted to recreate the device in 1978. Their lab suffered an unexplained electrical fire that destroyed their prototypes and half their research, despite no faulty wiring in the building. Even conservators at the National Museum of Iraq, where the battery is kept, report persistent headaches and dizzy spells when handling it, as if the clay itself hums with residual energy. Skeptics argue the tragedies are just the collateral damage of Iraq's turbulent history. The museum was looted during the 2003 invasion, with countless artifacts destroyed or stolen. Yet the Baghdad battery remained untouched, almost as if the thieves feared to take it. Then there's the eerie case of a British journalist who scoffed at the curse in a 2010 documentary, joking he'd risk the vaults. Days later, his hotel room was struck by a freak power surge that fried his equipment and left him with second-degree burns from a malfunctioning lamp. Coincidence, maybe, but the pattern is hard to ignore. Science offers tantalizing clues. When filled with an acidic electrolyte like vinegar, the jar can produce around 1 volt of electricity, enough to electroplate small objects or, as some speculate, create eerie sensations in rituals. Ancient texts from the Parthian era mention vessels of shining magic used by priests to summon divine sparks. Could the battery have been a tool for manipulation, its mild current convincing worshippers of a god's presence? And if so, what happens when modern hands disturb that sacred trickery? The most chilling theory comes from an Iraqi museum guard who claims the battery isn't cursed, it's awake. He recounts nights when the display case glass fogs up from inside, or the faint smell of vinegar lingers in the air, though no liquid remains in the jar. Scientists dismiss it as humidity or imagination, but in a land where history stretches back to the dawn of civilization, some truths resist labs and logic. The Baghdad battery may not hold a curse in the traditional sense, but it certainly holds a warning. Some inventions, no matter how ancient, weren't meant to be rediscovered. And sometimes the past doesn't just whisper, it burns. From the blood-soaked tombs of pharaohs to the mercury-laden tunnels beneath forgotten pyramids, one chilling thread connects these stories. History doesn't always stay buried. Whether you believe in curses or call them cruel coincidences, the pattern is undeniable. Those who disturb the past often pay a price. Science offers rational explanations: toxic molds, ancient pathogens, psychological suggestion. But even the staunchest skeptics pause when the deaths align too perfectly, when the timing feels less like chance and more like punishment. Perhaps these curses aren't supernatural at all, but something far more unsettling: echoes of humanity's oldest instinct, the desire to protect what's sacred even in death. Think about it. Every warning inscription, every ritual trap, every whispered legend serves the same purpose: to keep the living at bay. The Egyptians lined tombs with arsenic. The Teotihuacanos filled tunnels with liquid mercury. The Moch bound their dead with silver shackles. Were these just practical deterrents, or did these cultures know something we've forgotten? That some knowledge carries a weight too heavy for the living to bear. The Dresden Codex's poisoned ink, the Lycurgus cup's nanotechnology, the Voynich manuscript's unsolvable cipher, they all whisper the same question: what happens when curiosity outruns respect? This isn't just about fear, it's about the thrill of the unknown, the magnetic pull of mysteries that defy logic. We're drawn to these stories because they live in the liminal space between fact and folklore, where history blurs into myth. The Hope Diamond's trail of ruined lives, the Nazca Line's deadly defiance, the Oak Island pit's endless allure, they tap into something primal. They remind us that for all our technology, there are still puzzles even modern science can't crack. And maybe that's the point. So what do you think? Are curses real or just tragic coincidences dressed in legend? Could there be forces, chemical, psychological, or otherwise, that we're only beginning to understand? Drop your theories in the comments and let's keep the conversation alive, because this isn't the end of the journey, it's just the beginning. From lost cities to artifacts that defy explanation, the past still holds secrets waiting to be uncovered. And who knows, the next ancient mystery we explore might just change how you see history, or the unseen forces that shape it. Stay curious, but remember, some doors once opened can't be closed. And some warnings were written in stone for a reason.